Story 1. I might have imagined it, but my pre-kindergarten teacher had something like a Nerf gun that she would shoot at misbehaving students. I distinctly remember an instance when the teacher sternly pointed the toy gun at a child, followed by a loud thwack, and then a cry of WAA. Story 2. The science teacher gathered everyone around his table at the front of the class. He brought in liquid nitrogen and poured it on the desk to demonstrate its effects. The liquid produced smoke and spread everywhere, freezing parts of my trousers. Thankfully, I was wearing Teflon trousers, which just cracked. Story 3. My sixth grade teacher would bet us that we could not achieve 100% on certain tests, and when we succeeded, he would pack us into the bed of his El Camino and drive us to get pizza or ice cream. I do not think we got our parents' permission. Of course, that was back in the early 1980s. Story 4. A certain old-school second-grade teacher got fed up, leaned over, opened the window next to her desk, lit a cigarette, and told us that if we didn't want to write lines all afternoon, we could draw with crayons. She had a beehive hairstyle to put it in context. Story 5. He asked the first-year girls what their body counts were in high school. He also tried to teach the boys in class that it is acceptable for men to beat their wives because men are naturally inclined to do so. He is going through a divorce. A different teacher asked a student out as soon as she turned 18. The school security officer was assisting in removing protesters outside of the school, but students were still among them. Another teacher from middle school was suspended for watching inappropriate content on the smartboard. Story 6. I hadn't remembered this in years. The students in high school, who unfortunately sat right next to me, had an ongoing farting competition. They would show me their salami sandwiches and smirk. At some point during the school year, the teacher noticed the smell, literally. Let me point out it was summer with all the windows open. So when the odor reached him, he commanded with a sardonic smile that we close all the windows and continued teaching us statics in that incredibly hot classroom. He was a great guy, though. Story 7. An English teacher, known for her colorful rants, demanded that one of my classmates remove the recycling items from the garbage bin and place them in the appropriate blue bin. He refused, which further enraged her, culminating in her shouting, "Are you serious?" at him. Story 8. Freshman orientation, first class of the first year of high school. We talked about life and watched X-Files. Could not have been any better. The teacher was a former Green Beret and was still pretty fit. A student wanted to disrespect his authority and wouldn't leave the class, claiming he couldn't be touched. The teacher lost his job but made his point. We heard the thud of the student's body against the wall after he was dragged into the hall. I didn't see that student again either. Story 9. Teachers definitely have their wild moments. One of the craziest things my teacher ever did was walk into class wearing a superhero costume on a random Tuesday, just to rescue us from boredom before a big test. Story 10. Express what I believe was an example of positive symptoms of schizophrenia in front of the entire class. Story 11. A female English teacher slept with several boys. She was 45 and they were 13. She gave them free drugs and took them to metal festivals. Additionally, my music teacher, a 38-year-old man, had a relationship with a 14-year-old girl. He did not even try to keep it a secret. He introduced himself to her parents, telling them that their daughter was the love of his life. Story 12. Religious education had a teacher who was somewhat fanatical. He excluded a disruptive student who continually questioned the existence of God. The student was outside on the sports field and began shouting the teacher's name to get his attention, then called him some choice names. The teacher let out a growl and jumped straight out of the second-floor window, landing in a flower bed. He picked himself up and chased the student all over the sports field while we cheered from the windows. The next day, the teacher was gone and the student was the talk of the school. Story 13. Tell me the answer to a test. The same teacher let us watch The Walking Dead in class. Yes, he was my teacher. Another teacher had pet ducks that chased students around. Story 14. My school got a new teacher during my junior year. She was an attractive, cheerful woman in her mid-20s, with blonde hair. Until that year, she had only taught elementary school students. On the first day, I genuinely mistook her for a new student because she looked so young. She had a peculiar friendship with several of the popular boys on the sports team. Near the end of the year, I witnessed an incident where she playfully spanked one of them as he walked past. Although the student was 18, which prevented her from being fired, she never wore another dress, skirt, or any makeup to school again, and her entire demeanor changed. Story 15. I was caught drawing inappropriate images on the blackboard. Then she asked me to fill a sheet of paper with similar images and gave it to her. Story 16. My teacher got mad and threw her lunch tray at the principal. I heard it was full. Not my teacher. A preschool teacher approached me and handed me her book list for the next week or month for her classes. I work at a library. These were books that were last published in the 1990s. I told her we did not have physical copies, but we had ebook copies. She threw a tantrum about how, when I was young, libraries had books. I'm older than she is. I offered her books similar to what she wanted, but she took none. As she left, she pushed the pile off the table and onto the floor. Story 17. He would throw chalk and pencils at people if they were talking while he was writing on the board. One day, he threw a pencil crayon at someone so hard that it lodged 20 pages deep into the book on their desk. Story 18. The drama teacher told me I was gorgeous and inappropriately touched me when I was 16. He passed away a few years ago. The math and woodworking teacher was extremely sexist and belittled the girls in math class, but he seemed to like me because I was involved in sports. He would stay after class with me and allow me to work on my projects. I created some interesting items like a clock and a table with a book holder. I'm fairly certain I was the only girl who chose that class as an elective. I ended up really enjoying woodworking and spent time with my uncle during the summer using his machines to make small wooden boats, birdhouses, and decorative holiday crafts. I entered my projects in the local fair and won blue ribbons. Story 19. She fell asleep in class and stayed that way for about 15 minutes, slumped over at her desk, snoring. When someone finally woke her up, the rest of the class, who had been playing video games on their phones and handheld consoles, were dismayed. She complained, "Why didn't anyone wake me up?" and then continued with the lecture. Story 20. I got sick when we were supposed to go on a field trip. She didn't believe me, so she recorded it as an unexcused absence. In our school, we followed an hourly system, so missing one class equaled 1 hour missed. The maximum for one day would be 8 hours, but she recorded 24 hours. Story 21. I had a teacher in 3rd grade who was legitimately abusive. This was in 2003, so it wasn't long enough ago that her behavior was accepted or allowed, but I was in a language immersion program, and it was really difficult at the time to find teachers for it, so she got away with her actions for way too long. In addition to making several parents cry, as well as pretty much all the kids, with her vicious and unkind words, she also duct-taped rowdy students to their chairs on multiple occasions, purposely attempted to sabotage students' after-school and extracurricular activities, told parents they weren't allowed in her classroom outside of parent-teacher conference days, and engaged in psychological manipulation by seriously accusing kids of trying to harm her if they dropped a pencil on the ground, and didn't immediately pick it up, claiming she could slip and fall and break her neck. She encouraged us to be honest with her if we didn't like something, such as a movie or book, and then vehemently shamed us if we expressed our dislikes. Needless to say, everyone hated her, parents included. Meetings were held with the principal, and her behavior was noted in her record, but that was it. Eventually, a few years later, she was finally ousted from the school district completely and forbidden to teach children ever again. She still kept in touch with some of the teachers from the program, though, and when my class was in high school, she came by to inform all of the classes that she had stage 4 colon cancer. You could hear a pin drop in that classroom when she said it. Not a single person said a word to her. We just waited until the teacher ushered her out. When she left, one of the bold boys said, "Well, karma, right?" Our teacher gave him a disapproving look but did not punish or correct him for saying what everyone was thinking. Story 22. Drew a dot on the chalkboard. I was asked to put my nose on it. Then I was smacked on the back of my legs with a long wooden ruler, and my nose bounced on the dot. Story 23. A physics teacher shocked a student with several thousand volts. A biology teacher and deputy principal sprayed everyone's legs with a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher. Story 24. A teacher entered the classroom and forcibly removed a classmate who had done nothing wrong, then assaulted him. We were about 15 years old. I was in shock, sitting a few seats behind. No one said a word. I regret not informing my parents about what happened. This was not a common occurrence, but it did happen occasionally. The school hardly demonstrated any Christian values that day. It was absolutely horrific. Such behavior would lead to severe consequences today. Looking back on it now, it seems quite mad. Story 25. My English teacher in 8th grade had an unfortunate incident in class one day. She quietly walked to the bathroom, and it was noticeable that her dress was altered by the added weight. Story 26. Biology teacher's dog had a stillborn litter of puppies, and he brought them in for the class to dissect. He was fired and faced significant legal trouble with the health board and animal control. I think he was also criminally charged, but I'm not sure of the outcome. What was he thinking that this could be a good idea? Story 27. An algebra teacher at the university smoked cigars during classes, and usually threw the cigar but in the trash bin. One day it caught fire. Calm as a river, he picked up the bin and dumped it in the parking lot from a third-floor window, then resumed the class as if nothing had happened. As a bonus, he had several strokes in past years, which prevented him from writing on the board due to tremors. The worst part was that while explaining concepts, he would often stop mid-sentence and freeze for several seconds. Initially, I was shocked, but seeing the rest of the class remain calm, most of whom had previously failed the class and were familiar with the teacher, I gradually got used to it. By the second and third years, yes, I also failed twice. It felt completely normal. This is the craziest part. Engineering university is wild, and I have other stories from different teachers. It was surreal. Story 28. A grade 12 history teacher was accused of having an inappropriate relationship with his intern. His wife was divorcing him because of it. One day in class, he yelled, "Who believes the rumors?" Over half the class raised their hands. He never graded a single assignment or test the entire semester, and when pressed for grades, he would seemingly make them up on the spot. A couple of years after graduation, about 5 girls from high school told me he actively pursued them at a bar. One mentioned playing strip poker with him, and he was not winning many hands. In a second story, my 75-year-old computer science teacher at university offered to wrestle someone in class for a case of beer. He was also rumored to avoid using computers and would have his graduate students print his emails for him and type responses. Story 29. Had a psychotic episode and broke down. I think I crawled out the window and left. We were all shocked. We never saw her again and had a substitute for the rest of the year who let us do rap battles for extra credit. The class wasn't particularly negative or mean towards her. We all liked her. It was sad to see it happen. Story 30. During class, a boy pointed at me and exclaimed, "I think you're a paranoid schizophrenic." He was close. I have schizoaffective disorder. Another student wrote, "What a figure," in an encyclopedia that displayed an image of a woman with her organs. The teacher, a nun, saw the comment and responded, "You're horrible." She then threw a chair against the wall and ran out crying, not returning until the next day. In science class, my teacher broke open a thermometer and started playing with the mercury. Story 31. A young woman invited 4 boys to her home to help pack her apartment for a move to her boyfriend's place. However, she never packed anything. When it was time to move her dresser, I removed the drawers to make it lighter. We all saw her intimate lingerie and a drawer full of adult toys. She felt embarrassed. Story 32. A teacher flipped a child's desk after the student coughed. Later, she was fired for dragging the child to the classroom sink and splashing water in their face while yelling about respecting authority. The child had only gone to the water fountain. Story 33. My sociology teacher leaned against the edge of her desk and started making unusual noises. This was the 3rd class of the semester. She was very unpredictable. Story 34. It's linked to my most shameful moment as well. A teacher read a love letter from a boy who had a crush on me in front of the class. And my loud reaction was, I would never date someone like him. The class laughed, and we were around 12 years old. Whenever I remember this, I feel annoyed at that teacher, embarrassed for the guy, and ashamed of myself. The worst part is that the guy eventually took his own life years later when he was about 18. There were some issues in his family, and he might have been slightly on the spectrum. I feel a measure of guilt about the whole situation. Looking back, he was just your typical nerdy guy, and my middle school arrogance might have contributed to his undoing. In a way, I make sure to remember this to keep myself in check, reminding myself that being attractive or popular is not a ticket to being unkind ever again. Story 35. In middle school, I had a teacher go out of her way to convince the principal to ban a friend from the senior trip to a water park because she disliked him. She cited behavior issues, but the student barely misbehaved that year and was genuinely doing well. She also argued in favor of two twins who had ambushed a classmate in a closet, refused to take tests, and would destroy the ceiling during exams or pretend to be cats. These two were a constant burden and danger, yet she fought with all her might to include them in the trip. She even had them color a SpongeBob picture for their science final. I have never forgiven her for that, honestly. It was the most blatant favoritism I have ever witnessed in school. Story 36. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. Story 37. My second grade teacher used to have an old belt that she would use to strap the energetic child to his chair when he started wandering. This was about 40 years ago when that sort of thing was still permitted. Story 38. I'm black. In 7th grade, my Indian teacher sat me down after class and told me he understood what I was going through. People called him derogatory names his whole life. He became emotional and started to tear up, which seemed to come out of nowhere. There were a lot of black kids in the class. I wasn't bullied and was on sports teams. I don't know, it just felt weird. Story 39. My history teacher had a painting in his classroom that he created, depicting Obama in front of a burning flag with devil horns on his head. He said it was a reminder of our nation's darkest time. Story 40. I named a file on my school computer File, and my computer teacher found it while looking through my computer outside of class and held a surprise discussion about it during lunch with two of my other teachers, talking about how hurtful it can be. He made me uncomfortable, giving off inappropriate vibes, typical of teachers who get unusually close and friendly with students. Story 41. A high school teacher would walk home during lunch, drink alcohol, and then make inappropriate advances toward the teenage girls in the class. Story 42. One teacher responded to me snapping my fingers at her. She turned bright red and said, "I can't believe I reacted to that," and laughed. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.